All right, we're going to look at 3 different type of drop lunge variations. First of all, we're going to start off with the forward drop lunge. Mal's going to perform here. Now, what we've got to bear in mind here, a couple of things we're looking for is all the same stuff we've talked about in the past with the rib cage and the pelvis position, but a big part of this is it's that kind of quick drop down, absorbing that force, and it's actually the speed or impact that we land on the floor that creates that increased tension demand from the muscle that we're trying to work. So with the forward drop lunge, we're increasing the tension demands of the quad, having to absorb that force and then accelerate away, opposing the friction that's created with that foot landing on the floor. Now, if I bring this plate forward, we do the reverse drop lunge, opposite thing here. We're looking actually to target the glutes much more heavily here, as these are much more biased to opposing that frictional force that we have when we land on the floor. So that glute has to then act against that step back to then drive us back to that starting position again. Now, if we wanted to again bring in a bit more glute medius bias, I could get Mal to do that same thing that we did with the curtsy lunge, where she's going to step back slightly across the body so that her foot almost finishes behind or just slightly past the heel. And so now she loads up that glute medius a lot more with that drop lunge. We're going to look at the quad dominant drop lunge. So we're going to look at, first of all, just what does Mal have to actually maintain throughout these movements, because it's quite a dynamic movement we're doing here, unlike split squat variations. So that rib cage and pelvis alignment is going to have to stay where it needs to stay throughout. When we're looking at the quad dominant, again, things apply here are going to be the hip staying in extension, the rib cage staying aligned with that, and really focusing on getting the knee driving forward over the toe as much as possible. The big difference is here now is that as she drops down, she has to absorb that force that she lands on the floor with, and then she has to oppose the friction that's created there in order to drive back up. And it's that absorbing that kind of deceleration and that increase in friction that really places that high demand on the quad. So as you'll see here, she's not just like falling and just kind of falling into that lunge. Exactly, or collapsing forward. It's a very considered but explosive movement here. So she absorbs the force on the way down and then accelerates back up to that starting position. So one more. And that is our forward drop lunge. Looking at a drop lunge for biasing the glutes now. So we're going to get Mal to take a nice big step back here. Again, things we're going to look at are going to be rib cage and pelvis staying in line. Now, of course, as she steps back for this hip dominant variation, the torso is going to end up going forward, but it's just making sure that that rib cage and torso positions stay aligned throughout the entirety of the movement. Now, big aspect of this movement is going to be, unlike the split squat where she's in a static position, this is a very fast movement, it's a very accelerative movement, but the big part of this is actually the kind of dampening on the way down. So she has to absorb the impact of that back foot landing, making sure that she owns and controls the landing before then accelerating up to that starting position. And so it's that, deceleration and friction on the way down here. She has to really use that glute out of that bottom position to really extend back to that starting position. So one more, Mal. So absorb the impact and then accelerate away. And this is much more glute biased. Another glute biased drop lunge variation, except this time now with a bit more of an emphasis on the glute medius fibers. This is going to be the curtsy drop lunge. So we're going to get Mal to step back. She's going to absorb the landing on the impact. Big difference really here is that she's going to step slightly across the body so that the foot ends up in line or slightly past the line of this front foot here. Again, no, it's the deceleration and the friction component here that really increases the demands of the glutes to return back to that starting position. So you'll see that she doesn't just fall down if you do like a collapsy reps, Mal. She doesn't just collapse and fold. She keeps this all rigid throughout the movement. She decelerates into that and doesn't want any of that either. She decelerates into that bottom position, absorbs that force as she lands, and then she accelerates right back to that top position. So this is going to bias much more of the glute medius fibers.